Hello, historians. This will be our last segment of the video. I want to start by just saying, again, with social structure, as states expanded and wealth expanded, social and gender hierarchies became more rigid and intensified. So we see more patriarchy and more male domination of society is what that means. And we see people with different roles, and those roles have different values to the society. And so some people are considered more valuable than others. So, for example, we've got the ruler or some type of important person here symbolized by his really big size, and you can tell that because he's larger than the other people, and ooh, geez, that's not good. And he's also facing them. So then he's probably, this is a banquet. So they've got some like dancing people here and some servants and some guys probably working for him. And then you've got all the people watching who are drinking some wine. And then you've got some musicians back here and some more like dancers. These are the people who contributing to that. You've got all your like people offering, their animals. And then down here you have the farmers and the artisans and a little bit of the pastoralists. So yes, social hierarchies, they're happening. Along with religion. So most societies during this time period were polytheistic, meaning they had many gods. The kind of exception to this is a little bit of China because they had like a different version of this with their ancestors. So still lots of people, but again, ancestor worship. So these gods controlled the environment, and usually different gods controlled different parts of the environment. So in Egypt, these gods tended to be pretty positive, like because of their pretty positive environment that they were surrounded by, getting back to the earlier videos. And because of this, they had a really positive view of the afterlife. In Mesopotamia, because of their surroundings, they had a much more negative view of the afterlife. And their gods were more spontaneous, if you could call it that, or just basically like more fickle and really ready, and you're going to see this in the Epic of Gilgamesh, ready to just destroy people if they wanted to. In India, this comes down to the Vedic religions, which was a mixture of the Aryan beliefs and the Dravidian beliefs, which is written down in the earliest text as the Rig Veda. And this becomes what we call today Hinduism in the West. Caste was a big part of this. There were different castes for different roles in society. The priests were on top. And then there were, below that, they were jatis. So these were subcastes. And we will talk a lot more about that in class. And this is an important thing to remind you of. Like, this video is meant to be a general overview. I'm not getting very specific. We are going to be going more into these features in class. But that's kind of what I want you to know for now about the Aryan tradition and those castes. The Vedas are the Aryans' text, and Sanskrit is what the Vedas are written in. And the most important religious text is the Rig Veda. In this text, you see one god featuring prominently, and that's Indra. And that's not really a god that's super prominent in Hinduism anymore, but is involved in the Vedas. The Sanskrit that these were written in, most people couldn't read. And so this is another like part of the Aryans. The Aryans could read. And actually, like, most of them probably couldn't read it as well, but Aryans could read this, and so they became the Brahmins, or the priests. And the Rig Veda outlined very elaborate ceremonies and ritual sacrifices to the gods that then the priests would perform. So we will talk more, and that's very similar to all of the different religions from these river valley civilizations. The element of sacrifice, oops, as well as, one group of people being able to understand this and other groups not so much, knowing that it's important, but not knowing exactly what it was all about. And the prominent role of these gods in their agriculture. So, there was also monotheism, and the most prominent group for that is Hebrews, and so this is in Mesopotamia. And the Hebrew monotheists were pastoralists. And their relationship with their God was different because they had a covenant, which meant that if they had moral behavior according to their God, Yahweh, or as we call today, God, if they had moral behavior and followed the religious codes, God would bless them, basically. So this is very simplified, obviously. So it's not just God like doing whatever he wants, it's this kind of pact, and that's important. Another group of monotheists are Zoroastrians, and they're in modern day Persia. And this was a religion that was started by Zoroaster. And we will get into that more in class. But there were more monotheists than just Hebrews. A lot of societies wrote down their religions and wrote about their religions in religious texts. So, for example, the first epic is the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this was written in Mesopotamia. And this guy here is Gilgamesh. There he is. He was a king who was 2/3 God, 1/3 human, which tells you there was a little mix-up there with understanding of, if your dad and one parent is God and one parent is human, how do you end up with a third and 2/3? Gilgamesh was on a quest, because that's what you do in an epic, for immortality. I already talked about the Rig Veda. And then the Book of the Dead is an Egyptian, basically guide to get into the afterlife after you have died. So how do you get from, the place that's housing your soul, your Ka, to the afterlife? Trade. Trade was also very important. Trade could be regional, meaning like within your empire. So let's say if your empire's here, in Mesopotamia, you could trade within your region. But it could also be trans-regional. So Egypt and Nubia could be an example of regional trade. But trans-regional would be like Mesopotamia and the Indus River Valley and Egypt. And this map just shows you what these different groups are trading and some of the prominent goods of the time. And I think it's interesting in that regard. But, you can kind of see like a lot of this is luxury goods already. So it's things people need like grain and granite, but it's also things people want like turquoise and lapis lazuli, which are both beautiful stones, and textiles. So you can see different regions were already specializing and by their geography, and that's going to be a trend we can see continue. Phoenicia was also a big trading city. They're the people with the cool language. So here's Israel. Here's Phoenicia. You can see they're very close to each other, very close to Mesopotamia. And yeah, they established colonies throughout the Mediterranean, as the Greeks are going to do later, which is why their language is so closely associated with Greek. So there you have it, the beginnings of civilization in a big picture focus. Make sure that you are trying your best with the questions, and I will see you in the fall. And after you're done with this video, make sure you start working on that key concept packet. Hopefully this will guide you in those big picture concepts as you move through to look for historical examples that prove these big ideas I've been talking about. Have a wonderful rest of your summer, and I will see you soon.